Okay, hi Santo. I know this is probably a little bit weird, but I hope it is the most effective way to draft. So, I've highlighted a few areas and I will talk you through them. So, form. You just got to make it clear that the advertiser is MAC, which is an Australian government organisation, okay? And I think both advertisements are MAC. Yes, they're both print advertisements placed in venues that sell alcohol. Be more specific in social venues where young people congregate to drink alcohol. Stop saying I've personally seen and later on you say I believe. So this is a South Australian organisation, so this is purely a campaign that was published in South Australia. And I think that one is probably going to be in men's toilets, not the women's toilets, because it's got a picture of a boy. And the other one is targeted at men. So now you've asked me to help cut down on your word count, and you are being extremely wordy. The reason A is placed in locations such as this is simply because the portrayed message targets people under high intoxication of alcohol who are considering driving despite their obvious incapability to safely drive. So just cut it. Make it really concise, Santo. So the advertisers have targeted locations such as this in order to most effectively reach their target audience of young men who may be tempted to take risks while driving. You could probably cut that next bit. Likewise, is placed in a location where drunken populations can view this advertisement. Well, it's not, because I've seen that on road billboards along motorways, and I am not a drunken population, ever, Santo. So, likewise, advertisement B is placed in locations where it would be highly visible to the target audience of young male drivers. Can you see the difference? Good. Purpose. If you look down here and you remember the PowerPoint, advertisements are either there to persuade people to buy their product or to change behaviors. So this is about changing behaviors. So make it clear that you understand that the purpose of both advertisements is to address a major issue in society, which is that of drink driving, by inspiring or convincing or persuading their target audience to change their behaviors. We'll talk about the emotional response a bit later. You could say that yes, in order to do this, they evoke or play on the audience's sense of guilt in the case of advertisement A, and anger in advertisement B. Advertisement A induces this emotional response from viewers through the statement made by a child. So you're being too wordy. You're going to address all of this. I don't think you really need to go into all this detail as long as you've summed it up properly, because you're going to be talking about all of this in your analysis of the language. You could say that Mac did a survey. I think another student's doing this, and she did check that they had done a survey to find out reasons why people thought that it was okay to drink drive or took that risk. So drink drivers commonly use this excuse. So Mac did research. Well, Mac sent out a questionnaire and discovered that this is a commonly used excuse that drivers often use to reassure themselves that the risk they are taking is in fact safe. correct being ethically incorrect and extremely dangerous. So they've taken this excuse that they got from a questionnaire. So they know that it's an excuse that many, many young drivers use. So they're going to create an emotional connection immediately by using, by being able to connect immediately with their target audience. Either we've heard people say it or we've said it ourselves. Obviously not me, Santo. The smart use of the statement advertisement A most definitely deters viewers. So you were talking about the target audience or drivers or young male drivers to consider to shame. Well, yeah, it's shaming them into out of that behavior and to grow up. Now, it's not the same emotional response from viewers. This one is one of anger. It's not empathy. It's not saying be nice to people who your mate who's going to drink drive. It's saying tell him he's a wanker. It's a much more forceful attitude, isn't it? So you need to just have a look, and you can cut a lot of this and make sure that you have just stated very clearly what the purpose is and what the emotional response, how they are creating an emotional response to achieve this purpose. Target audience. You need to be careful. I'm not sure that they are a target audience of similar ages. And I don't think they're targeting people from the age of 16 because, well, actually, maybe you could leave that in. I will undo that. But cut all of this. You need to show that the target audience of the first one is an older male driver. Look at the way that the child model is dressed, okay? And then compare that to the blokey colloquial language of the second advertisement. So let's have a look. Oh, it's down at the bottom. Okay, the boy is dressed in a shirt and tie. He's at what looks like quite a nice wine bar. It's not just a pub, because look, there are cocktail glasses and champagne glasses. So socioeconomically, this audience is perhaps a young professional, or it's not a worker, is it? It's not a plumber or an electrician. This is what's called a white collar worker. A professional, the kind of young men who congregate in pubs after work to have a few drinks, and then they use that excuse and they drive home over the limit. So I would say that this is probably looking at an age group not exclusive to, but probably I'd have thought around about 25 to 35. And I think, yes, it's male because the boy is a boy. This one is aimed much more at a younger or a slightly different demographic, isn't it? Probably around 18 upwards, but I'd say predominantly 20, 25 upwards, but it's a different socioeconomic bracket. This seems to be the ute driving blue collar workers. These are working class Aussie blokes. They don't work in offices, they drive utes, and they do physical labour, and they call each other mate, and they use words like PISSED, and they use this word here, which I'm not going to say. So, tidy up your target audience, Santo. Where's everything gone? Oh, it's at the top. Oh. Okay, so you need to tidy up your target audience. You can cut quite a few of this. Social context. Just make it clear that the statistics of drink driving, what are they? Have they increased? Are they on the rise? Why has Mac launched so many campaigns? Are fatalities declining or growing? Okay, this is what you need to be addressing in your social context. Visual elements. Okay, you say no dominant visual elements. But it does. So you need to re-look at this whole paragraph, okay? It's too wordy and you're not actually giving enough analysis of visual elements. So you need to go back to the visual elements of visual language, handout, and you need to look again at the way the two advertisements behind it have been annotated. And you need to structure this paragraph more logically. So you introduce the visual element and then you analyze how each advertisement uses it and explain the effect. So for example, both advertisements use color to convey different messages, or both use display fonts, but in different ways. One is to evoke the emotional connection that people who drink drive are behaving irresponsibly like little children. And the other is using the display font to recreate the cartoonish, what are these things called when you've got the W and the anchor? You need to look it up. It's not a meme, but maybe it is a meme. But this is a, it's playful, it's colloquial, but it's using cartoonish image and color in order to reinforce this sort of blokey, colloquial. It's talking to you. It's using direct address. If your mate's planning to drive home pissed, oops, I said it. Oh dear. Tell him he's a thingy. So, it's at the top. This is driving me nuts. Okay. So you need to go back and look at color, look at display fonts, look at where they're positioned. Look at in the first advertisement, look at the body language of the model. It's costume. It's dressed as a office worker. Look at the setting, foreground and background. What's in the background? So you're going to need to have a look at that, and you need to analyze aim for 3 to 4 techniques. Use the technical language on the elements of visual language handout. Use the print media comparative analysis examples. The X itself is in the foreground, so its prominence is in the main focus of the advertisement. That's the kind of language you need to use. Language, it's not a rhetorical meaning. Again, they both use colloquial language, but one is very much a blokey, male Aussie slang. The other is taking commonly used excuses by people who probably otherwise don't break the law. I'm not saying that the others do, but it's just taking a colloquial phrase that people use. Drink drivers in order to reassure themselves not doing wrong. It's not a rhetorical statement. It's an excuse. And the emotional connection here is very much the idea that people who use this excuse to drive drunk are irresponsible and immature. Now, children can behave in that way because they have the excuse of not knowing any better. But the idea here is you're an adult. You do know better, and therefore, if you drink drive, you are going to be a social outcast. So it's appealing to this value. If you look at the handout of the values and desires, it's the opposite of popularity. It's exclusion. It's trying to reinforce this idea that drink driving is socially unacceptable. It's not cool. It's not clever. It's not something that you can make a little excuse about. It is unacceptable, and there are no excuses. In the second one, yes, they're using the language to reinforce, to try and, again, based on research, to use peer pressure from blokes to blokes. They're trying to reverse this